Tonight on Real News from the Blaze, will a toxic mess from the Eurozone meltdown wash up on our shores, Andrew?
How could it not? I mean, it is a global economy. As much as we might want to believe we're isolated, we're not, because again, it is a global economy. Watch the price of gold.
All right, all that and much more on Real News from the Blaze coming up in just 60 minutes.
This is not going to be about politics. This is about principles. We're going to take it upon ourselves to be part of the solution.
We are going to restore history, restore our honor, restore his idea that character is what matters.
Let us not lose this battle because we sat down.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Well, hello, America, and welcome to the Glenn Beck Program and to GBTV. This is the network that you are building. Thank you for that. What you believe is determined by what you think your past is. What you believe in the present is determined by all of our past. That's why progressives have desperately tried to control what is taught about history. And it's why they, what was it the president's wife said? Barack knows that we have to change our traditions and our history and move into a different place as a nation. That's a quote from her. She knows, everybody knows in the progressive movement, that if you can alter history, you can make people believe whatever you need them to believe about themselves and their position in the present. The past matters. In the coming week, we're going to do a series. In fact, we're going to do it all over the summer. We're going to do a series of specials on history that, quite honestly, buckle up, gang, because your perspective on several things is going to change. Because our history has been altered for both the good and the bad. You haven't been taught the truth. Fair warning, you know, when I read Blacklisted by History, the story on McCarthy, I knew my perspective was going to change, and I'm like, I don't know if I want it to change. When I started looking in the progressive era and Woodrow Wilson, I knew my perspective was going to change. When I found and really read up on Andrew Jackson and what a dirtbag that guy was, Manifest Destiny, my thoughts of our nation changed. But it didn't destroy it, it just made it deeper. My love for the country became deeper. I knew who the bad guys were, and I could defend my country. In our upcoming shows, you're going to be challenged on what you believe. In doing some research and working on some other things that we'll announce here in the next few weeks, I spent some time with a Native American, and I apologize in advance to 1/32 of Elizabeth Warren, but this guy is so non-PC that he actually preferred being called an Injun rather than Native American, and not even an Indian, but an Injun. We spent about, I love this guy, we spent about an hour chatting, and somehow or another we ended up talking about the Great Depression. And I asked him what it was like, the Great Depression on a reservation. He said something fascinating I'd never thought of before. He said the Depression didn't affect the members of the tribe at all. He said they had nothing to lose already. And he said, I remember my grandmother and my grandfather talking about the Depression and how it didn't affect their lifestyle at all because they were already self-sufficient and they lived within their means. They were self-contained. What did affect them was World War II. His grandfather fought the Nazis proudly. He was an American. I want to talk to you about half of that. I want to talk to you about war may or may not come. I don't know. But global economic destruction is coming. So how are we going to deal with it? How can you get yourself out of the system so it doesn't affect you? Well, here's what you need to remember tonight. Economic destruction does not have to mean your destruction. We spent a long time and a large amount of time on this program trying to help you prepare for really anything. Natural disasters, recession, depression, another term of Barack Obama, you name it. Things like buying gold, to me, seem like common sense. It is called a gold standard for a reason. It always comes back. But the critics, mock and call anybody who says that crazy, and then some. In one thing that I've never seen in American history, and I study American history, I've never seen the full force of the United States government come out against an individual and try to just obliterate them and their business, as the Congress did when the left decided they were going to investigate one of my biggest sponsors, Goldline. Now, here's a company that's rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. Been in business since like 1962. They had no case to begin with, which should explain why they chose a wiener to be the face of it. But then that wiener decided to show America more than just his face and more of the wiener. Oh, there he is. But they kept on going, calling anyone that would suggest gold was a safe haven crazy. Warren Buffett's right-hand man was at it just a couple of weeks ago. Listen to this amazing statement.
I think gold is a great thing to sew into your garments if you're a Jewish family in Vienna in 1939, but I think civilized people don't buy gold. They invest in productive businesses.
You know, I sure would like to invest in productive business. In fact, I am. But I also hedge my bet. I'm also pretty sure the Jews in 1939 didn't say, this is a great thing. We're sewing this stuff into the hems of our clothes. But thanks for the civilized comment. The civilized world went crazy, and that's why Jews sewed it into their garments. Here's the truth about gold. When Wiener took a break from his wiener to investigate Goldline, gold was at about $1,100. When I started talking about it on the air, I think it was around $600 or $700. Today, it is $1,540. I don't know. Who's crazy? Citigroup said that gold is going to hit $2,400 an ounce this year. Long term, they say it could reach as high as $3,400. Now, who's buying into this? Well, number one, Mexico. Mexico? 16.8 tons of gold have been added to its reserves in March. Do the math. That's nearly $1 billion in March that Mexico added. How about Russia? Russia increased its reserves by 16.5 tons. Turkey added 11.5 tons of gold. Argentina added 7 tons of gold to its holdings. This is the first addition to any reserve since February of 2005. And what is China doing? China is doubling it. 490 tons of gold in 2011. South Korea is buying gold. Thailand, Philippines, Colombia, all of them, they're all adding to their gold stockpiles. And America, what are we doing? Let me tell you something. Later tonight, I'm doing the message from the Oval. If I were president of the United States, one thing I would have done in the Oval Office is I would have said, we're going to invest in gold. We don't even know how much gold is even in Fort Knox. Is there any there? I believe personally that most of the gold is under the Federal Reserve. And yet Ben Bernanke mocks it. The president calls it crazy. Congress calls it crazy. But the joke's on you, they think. No. Ben Bernanke. The joke's on you, but the consequences will be on us. I want to show you something else. Look at the countries that are now teetering on the brink. These are the ones that are having real financial problems. You notice anything about these countries? Except for China, they're all Western. All of them. Western nations. Is Russia teetering? No. Nope, they're doing all right. China's only teetering because their economy is largely dependent on us and Europe buying their lead-soaked toys and other junk. And you know what? They're teetering with 8% growth. Boy, I'd love to teeter with 8% growth. How about you? Now, the other thing that was mocked that I talked about was farmland. Farmland. See the price of farmland? Shooting through the roof. Why? Well, it's what I learned from my friend the other day. If you can live off the land, none of what happens in the rest of the world will impact your day because you can live off the land. You want to take the stress off? You want to become truly independent? Maybe we should look to those who have lived off the land. Maybe you store food. I don't know. whatever, buy farm. Get together with people. You become independent. What's a better use of your money? Maxing out your paychecks on stuff that we don't need, or invest in food or things that are real? Which is irresponsible for the nation? Which is irresponsible? On Friday, we have a show with college students. They're having trouble finding jobs. I asked them, we recorded it last night, and I asked them, okay, none of you will find jobs, and some of you are going back for, another degree. Would any of you consider a job or a degree in ag? Here's a preview. Watch this. Would either of you two say, look, I got to tell you, I just want to work, and I want to do something, and I want to look to the future. I'm going to go get a degree in ag.
No.
No. Why?
Not by any means. Because, I don't feel like that would be competitive. It wouldn't be something that you'd be able to work well with.
Ooh. Really? And what about you? You wouldn't do it either?
Well, no, I am. I got a biology degree, but I'm going to go back for another year to get a nursing degree to get a better job.
Okay. Nursing is a growth industry, obviously, but the average farmer is 62 years old. There's nobody replacing them. Yeah. If you want, this requires you. I don't want to shovel crap. I already do that as news. I don't want to do that. But that is something where there's this giant hole. Everybody's looking to Wall Street. What are you going to Wall Street for? Okay. Don't miss this episode. You want to talk about a growth industry? It's agriculture. Here's what's amazing. That's 62. The stats of, the average farmer being 62? No. For every one farmer and rancher under 25, there are 5 who are 75 or older. This is like your house is on fire. Right now there are 5 firemen. Soon, for every 5 houses that are on fire, there's 1. This isn't going to last. Last year's farm income was a record, $98.1 billion, up from $79.1 billion in 2010. In the heart of the U.S. Corn Belt, cropland values rose 19% in the first quarter year. Hello? 5% over the previous quarter. Look, George Soros is on this. These hedge funds, they're on this. He's thinking years ahead. And a couple of years ago, he started buying up all kinds of farmland. When economic times get tough, things of intrinsic value go up. What's of more value intrinsically to the human race than food? And the places we grow our food. Look, I know most people don't want to hear this. I know. And that's why, let me preface it with this. Everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be okay. We survive in the end. Things go on. The lights continue. You're still watching television. It still happens. But times that are tough are coming. Economic times are about to get real tough. They're already starting in Europe. The head of the Bank of England came out and warned that there are major problems ahead for Europe. They are currently developing contingency plans because, quote, there are major credit losses to be realized. Whatever happens there will be difficulties ahead that will undoubtedly affect us. This is what our president should be telling us today. More and more, they're sounding the alarm bells on Europe's coming collapse.
Europe. Every day we hear the Europeans are slouching towards a credit crisis of epic proportions. I'm calling this DEFCON 3, 2 stages away from a financial collapse that is so huge it's hard to get your mind around.
Europe is a train wreck. We are on the brink of a major financial crisis in Europe.
You appear to be happy for millions and millions of people to be unemployed and to be poor. Untold millions must suffer so that your Euro dream can continue. Well, it won't work, because it's Portugal next. With their debt levels of 325% of GDP, they're the next ones on the list, and after that, I suspect it'll be Spain.
This will lead next week, more or less, to chaos, catastrophe, and collapse of the whole system, possibly.
Okay. Look, people know this is coming. There's no denying it, except in our own personal lives. In Greece, people have set up a barter system. They're already trading in cigarettes, booze, and gold. Yesterday, they had a run on the banks. $894 million was withdrawn in one day. Now, think of this. $1 billion pulled out of the bank. Can you imagine in a country like ours, $1 billion being pulled out of the banks by citizens who just run on the bank? But put this into perspective. This is a country half the size of metropolitan New York. If half of metropolitan New York had gone out and taken and withdrawn $1 billion out of the banks in one day, imagine what everybody would say about the health of the economy. Well, that's what happened. Except nobody's talking to you about it in that way. A population half the size of New York just took out $1 billion. They posted the pictures of the ATM lines on Twitter. That's it. People just going and taking their money out. Now, there's either a big sale on feta cheese, or people just know banks no longer safe for their money. The safest place might be under their pillow in Greece. Now, if you're not concerned about Greece and Europe, think of this. Remember when we learned that the massive EU bailout was significantly funded by our Fed? Remember that? They tried to hide it through what they called a temporary U.S. dollar liquidity swap arrangement. What is it? It was a bailout. And we're bailing out Europe, and it's not popular. Why? Why risk getting caught? Because they have to. Mutually assured economic destruction. If Greece falls, we all fall. And so far, every solution that's being presented only accomplishes one thing: kicking the can down the road for the next guy to deal with. That's it. Do you remember when we started loaning them U.S. dollars and exchanging them for EUs? Our Fed is now sitting with a whole buttload of euros. No one can solve this because we're operating with a false premise that government is the one that has to solve it. The reality is exactly the opposite. We have to solve it. We have to solve it fast. You know, the Wall Street Journal reported that nearly half of all Americans gave money to a family member in the last year just to help them pay bills. I have to tell you, that story both scares me and gives me profound hope. It's scary because it means we all know somebody that is having a really tough time struggling. But it's also encouraging because we step to the plate. We're being who we really are. We know we're the solution. I will be my brother's keeper. That's how we get out of this mess. It's not Republicans or Democrats or politicians. The problem is in Washington. The solution is right here in each of us. Earlier this week, I showed you a bakery in Ohio that was struggling. You want effective stimulus? Here it is, right here.
They buy things and say, do you need those mixing bowls? Do you need those rolling pins? Do you need that? I'm like, well, yeah, I have to bid on it. And they say, let us buy it for you. I just was like, the whole day I was crying because who does that?
The support was amazing, and when we reopened, it felt like they were friends, not customers. Because everyone loves us, and we love them.
I love this. This is who we are. When she said, who does that? I'll tell you who. Americans do. That ain't happening in China, gang. It's not happening in Russia. It's not happening in France or Germany. It's not. I've just been in Greece. It ain't happening in Greece. This is what makes America exceptional. We're great because we're good. It's in our DNA. It's who we are. Unless everybody switches history on us and we start to forget it. On 9/11, we were reminded of our true selves. Nothing mattered that day, except we all knew we were Americans and we were all in it together. You're not a slave to the system. We've all allowed ourselves to become a slave to the system and technology and everything else. Spit yourself out of that system. That's what they just did in Ohio with this bakery. They had a choice. They could buy cookies from some store where it's all trucked in from someplace else, or they could realize that their neighbor was in trouble. and they could help this bakery put things back right. Look, you can listen to Obama and move out of, the food desert and be in walking distance from Whole Foods, which, by the way, would still be in a food desert. We've checked the maps. Or you could do the unthinkable. You could move closer to a farm. You could just have food storage. You could find ways to become more independent. Are you going to look at things the trendy way and say, oh, finance and Wall Street, it's the way of the future? Or are you going to realize the world is about to reset itself? And it goes on, and we all survive. I talked to a guy who was an expert on nuclear weapons, and he said, you know what the most surprising thing is about a nuclear blast? Is the number of people who live. Everybody thinks they're going to die. Most live. That's the same with this. It's not the end of the world. Things just are not going to be the way they've always been. The gold standard of jobs is food. There's a lot of bad news out there, and it can be really depressing at times. Believe me, I know. But what gets me to get up in the morning is the ball is in our court. I can't control what others do. I can't control what you will do. I can't control what the president's going to do, but I can control what I do. Are you going to get angry? Are you going to complain? Will you unplug and ignore it like many people, some in my own family, have done? Or you do the simple things that our grandparents taught us, that my new engine friend did in order to become self-sufficient. Become self-sufficient and make this phrase true in your own life. Economic destruction doesn't have to mean your destruction. The president's life is fiction. You could call it a lie, but it is so far beyond a lie and a politician's lie. It is now in a novel. It is complete fiction. What most people don't know is the extent of the lies that we have been told. I wish these things weren't true, because when you really start to unravel all this stuff, something sinister is here. He's in charge of our future. Is he a good representation of what you believe? Somebody needs to remember all this stuff, because this will be history someday. Someday all of this truth will come out. Our sponsor this half hour is food insurance. It used to be prudent to store food. Our parents and grandparents used to can food, and they'd grow vegetables, and they would be prepared. I mean, they didn't do it because actually they did. My grandparents did. I don't know about yours. As I say, they would prepare it for any eventuality. No, they just had it because that's the way they lived their life. No, they lived their life because of the Great Depression. My grandparents died. I think my grandmother's last words may have been, "Make sure you don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Do you have enough food?" In a world that is more uncertain than ever, what are you going to do? If you still have common sense and you still believe that it is prudent to prepare, do what I did. Foodinsurance.com. Foodinsurance.com. 1-866-9-GOT-FOOD. Or log on to Food Insurance today. Find out how it works. It's how Tanya and I prepared to be a service to others.
Bringing a firearm into your home is one of the most important decisions you can make. If you are considering gun ownership, CheaperThanDirt.com is here to help you make a responsible and informed choice. We understand it is a personal decision how you choose to protect your family. We offer thousands of choices of firearms, ammunition, and accessories to suit your individual needs. Be responsible, be proactive, and exercise your Second Amendment right. Find us online at CheaperThanDirt.com. That's CheaperThanDirt.com.
Hi everyone, this is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. Free Pack is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepack.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
You look so beautiful, but you're about to lose everything.
You're gonna lose everything.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here.
You're gonna lose your files.
There's no warning when you lose your computer files. That's why you need Carbonite Online Backup. So whatever happens, your files are safe. Try it for free at Carbonite.com.
Hi, I'm Joe Gray with the GoJo Hands-Free, the only device on Earth that's truly hands-free. These things are not hands-free. You stick them in your ears, gross, but you still have to hold your phone. And these are not legal for hands-free driving. The GoJo goes on in 1 second. Hello? 1 Mississippi. Hey Mom, I can't talk right now. And it works with all phones. Flip phones, cordless phones, even landlines. And pop it off. Any phone, big or small, even the most radical moves won't knock it off. The GoJo goes on with one hand, so you can keep your eyes on the road. I love it.
It's true hands-free.
Call now and I'll send you 2 GoJos for just $10. And I'll throw in my Super Grip mat absolutely free. It grips and holds your phone, music player, or anything else you can think of. Call now and I'll double the entire offer. Just pay processing and handling. That's 4 GoJos and 2 Super Grip mats for just $10.
To order for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-493-0575 or order online at gojohandsfree.com.
Coming up on Real News, a Tea Party upset in Nebraska against another Tea Partier. SC, do we actually have a tempest in a teapot?
Yeah, Deb Fisher, a Tea Party newcomer in Nebraska, won her primary against another Tea Party candidate, thanks to a helpful endorsement from Sarah Palin. But at what cost to the Tea Party? We'll look at that tonight.
All right, that's up next on Real News from the Blaze right after Glenn at 6 o'clock.
Do you remember this headline? Mitt Romney's prep school classmates recall pranks, but also troubling incidents. Really? Washington Post ran this all last week. It's about how 47 years ago, 1965, Mitt Romney was a big bad bully in high school. What you didn't read in the Washington Post was, well, these stories. Remember John Kerry and the Swift boat ads? They centered around Kerry's anti-Vietnam testimony in 1971. That's where he accused the fellow soldiers of violating the Geneva Conventions in a fashion reminiscent of Genghis Khan. Only later did we find out that he said this after meeting in Paris with the North Vietnamese, the communists in Paris. In 1965, Mitt Romney was given haircuts. In 1970, this guy was doing things that you should have never given him a security clearance because he was meeting with our enemies at the time, communists. Let's go to Bill Clinton. Here's a story you probably never heard. In the 1970s, in fact, 1970, at the same time John Kerry was meeting with the communists, Bill Clinton was studying at Oxford. But in 1970, he went and he spent a week in Prague. And he stayed at the home of a couple who were members of the Czech Communist Party Central Committee. Now, these aren't normal communists. Because in 1968, there was the Czech Spring. And in the Czech Spring, they wanted to have a lighter bit of communism. No. He didn't go with those guys. He stayed a week at the house of the guy who led the charge. He was a strong Stalinist. He led the charge to crush the cry of freedom. He spent a week in their house, stayed with them. I don't know, eating popcorn, watching movies. I don't know what they did. I will tell you this. He did not have sexual relations with that communist. He didn't do it. Shouldn't have gotten a security clearance. By the way, did you hear Mitt Romney gave somebody a haircut in 1965? Media's out of control. Elizabeth Warren, we've told you, former head of TARP. Did you know she was a Native American? I know she doesn't look like a Native, high cheekbones. You didn't know that? Don't worry. Neither did the Native Americans. But hey, she's proud of her heritage. In fact, in 1997, we've just found out, Fordham Law Review did a piece describing her as Harvard Law School's first woman of color. You know what? Maybe there's something wrong with the monitors. We've been having problems. Can you put the color bars up? Okay. Adjust. You got the color adjusted? Go ahead, put her back up. Nope. Nope, didn't help. Still looks like a boring white person to me. Weird, isn't it? I'm pretty sure instead of being, 3% Cherokee, she's 100% liar. Maybe she drives a Jeep Cherokee. I don't know. The point is, no matter how stupid and dishonest it is, everyone who pays attention, they know. They're going to keep saying these things over and over and over again. She's still saying, everybody, her what do we call her, grandpapa or whatever he actually went out and rounded up the Indians on the Trail of Tears and killed them. But she's still saying, I'm proud of my heritage. You're not Indian. Eventually, the left knows this is true. If you say it enough, frequently enough, loud enough, and the media repeats it long enough, people are going to believe it. Or at least they'll just get frustrated with the back and forth and go, it doesn't matter, stop arguing. And they tune out. When that happens, where do you go for the truth? Well, you could start here. The truth has no agenda. I could tell you that I'm 1/32nd a sexy fashion model, but then here I'd have to give you the facts. And then when you see the facts, really, you'll be able to make up your mind for yourself. I'd rather, drinking days. I'd rather let you see the ugly, ugly, ugly truth, really. Because no matter how unpleasant it is, the media needs to know you can handle the truth. The left would rather deny it and distract and then rewrite history in real time. Next week, I'm doing an entire show on how this is happening right now. They're rewriting history right now. One day, if we don't pay attention, you're going to see photos of Elizabeth Warren wearing a headdress. Oh, my gosh. Hang on just a second. Bring the jib up. This is Elizabeth Warren. I didn't even know. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I shouldn't be walking on your face. One day, kids are going to say, this is the way she always dressed. And they won't even know the difference. She'll just be Native American. First Harvard law person or whatever of color. Is that Elizabeth Warren on top of the Capitol? Have you thought of, look, oh my gosh, look at the face. That's Elizabeth Warren. She's been there the whole time. You've just never noticed her before. By the way, did I tell you that raising taxes actually helps the economy? There's no such thing as Islamic extremism. And the economy is great. What are you talking about? Occupy Wall Street. No, it's Occupy Wall Street, or is it organizing window smashing? One of them is true. That was scary. There's one company who not only stood by my side through every attack on me, but was actually attacked themselves by the U.S. Congress. We talked about it earlier today because of their association with me, and that company is Goldline. I was a client of theirs before they were a client of mine, and they're as good as gold. Look, there I said it. I've always been up front with you. Gold is not right for everybody. I'm not just pitching gold. I buy it myself. I did before I even told you about it. It's worth looking into. Don't wait. As Europe starts to crumble, you'll see gold do this because people are going to have to dump what they have to pay off the things that they bought on margin. And they're going to sell their gold, and then the rest of the world will catch up to where you are now. That's just my opinion. Call for free information. Find out if it's right for you. Find out if you agree. Do your homework. Goldline. 1-800-757-GOLD. Call them now.
Preparation, focus, hard work. It's a personal commitment. It's what drives me. It gives me the confidence to look my opponent in the eye and say, game on. Preparing for life's future challenges is just as important. Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply gives me the same assurance that I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Preparation is everything. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
It's an unpredictable world. Disaster can strike at any time. That's why stove in a can should always be part of your emergency survival plan. With power out and gas lines down, stove in a can cooks your food and rapidly boils water. Portable, safe, and easy to use. With an all-natural waterproof fuel source you can store indefinitely. Say goodbye to dangerous propane, lighter fluid, and gas. Don't wait until it's too late. Stock up today and protect your family. Special bundle offers available at stoveinacan.com.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service, my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Hi everyone, this is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. FreePAC is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepac.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
I live alone, so when I slipped and fell in the kitchen last month and couldn't get to a phone, that's when I knew I needed Life Alert. With just one press of this button, I'm connected to the Life Alert Center, where I can get the help I need, even when I cannot reach a phone. With Life Alert, I'm never alone.
Call 1-800-996-6392 for your free Life Alert brochure. That's 1-800-996-6392. Call today.
I've told you that I'm good at making predictions, never on politics, but pretty good on the direction of the world and the country. But my timing is usually off. I've been warning for years, trouble is coming. Need to make some serious cuts to government and government spending, and if the cuts aren't made, trouble. But how much time do we actually have left? There's a new book out called The Debt Bomb. It's by Oklahoma Senator Tom Coburn. He joins us now from Washington. He says, Senator, 2 to 5 years?
You bet.
What makes you say it?
Well, if you look at where we are and you look at where the euro is, and you also look at Japan has a debt to GDP ratio of 220%, who's going to buy our debt? There has to be somebody that buys our debt. Last year, China dumped $160 billion of our debt. They were a net seller of our debt. So who is it in the world that's going to buy our debt? And who has confidence? If you look last year, 80% of our debt was bought by one firm, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States. In other words, we bought our own debt. We printed money to create debt.
Senator,
what happens when
Do you remember when I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you remember when Ben Bernanke said they would never do that? He was under oath in Congress, and he said we would never monetize our own debt. We'll never do that. Why don't we bring him up on charges for lying to Congress?
Well, I don't know the answer to that. What I know is they're doing everything that they can do to keep this thing afloat, except the things that we need to do, which is to reduce the size of the federal government, to reform the federal government, to reform the tax code, so that we create some certainty and confidence in our country, and so we get our mojo back.
Okay.
We're the last rose in the vase to wilt.
And we're looking pretty, I mean, you know, a lot of people, I actually had somebody say to me in the last week, Glenn, things are getting better. I'm like, you know, you can put lipstick on a pig all you want, but it's still a pig. The fundamentals are the early stages of Greece. When I first started saying Greece is going to melt down, that was about 2.5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Well, here it is, and where we are today is where they were.
Right, and remember, they've spent €1 trillion pushing this 6 months down the road to no avail, and the same thing's going to happen.
Okay, so...
And we can continue to do that, but that's going to undermine our kids, our family, and our country.
All right, not going to happen this year because you say it's an election year. Next year, going to happen?
Well, nobody knows exactly, but what's going to happen is the euro's going to come under attack, the yen's going to come under attack, and we're going to look good for a couple of years because we're seen as safe. But there'll be a point in time when people wonder, can you pay back your debt?
No.
And so what will happen is the interest rates on our debt will go through the roof. We're now paying under 2%. Our historical average is around 6%. If we were back to historical averages right now, that would be $650 billion additional interest a year for the federal government. That's coming in 2 or 3 years.
All right.
Everybody agrees that's going to happen.
So people like you, people like me, Tea Party, et cetera, all extremists. I mean, you know, when they kicked Dick Lugar out, they're calling him an extremist. I hear Orrin Hatch. I mean, he said it, these extremist Tea Party members. How can you, when you have the GOP coming out and saying that these are extremists that are asking for reasonable cuts right now, got to stop it. How do you win? How do you convince the American people?
Well, I think you convince the American people by who you send to Washington. Remember, we didn't get in this trouble just because of one party or one president.
No.
The problem in Washington is the Republicans and Democrats have agreed too much, not too little, and they've agreed on the wrong things. And the way you change that is quit sending career politicians to Washington.
How do you get the, let's say Romney wins. First of all, how do you raise, I mean, I'm not going to ask you this question because I know what you're going to answer. I mean,
I don't know.
You don't know how Romney is? How Romney's going to be?
I don't know who's going to win. You know, the point is we're not going to know. Glenn, I'd make one point with you. Our problems are so imminent and so urgent, we ought to be working on them right now regardless of who's president.
I know that.
There ought to be bills on the floor of the Senate to reduce the waste and fraud and abuse in the federal government, to eliminate programs. We ought to be there now. We're not. That's poor leadership. We have failed leadership.
On both sides.
Yes, sir.
Yes. The Republicans are not doing their job. They should have massive plans that they're presenting to the American people. They're not doing it. And the Democrats are just going in the other direction. So I agree with you.
Well, let me make one point. The reason I was late for your show is we just voted on 4 budget proposals from the Republicans and Obama. His budget got 0. And we had 4 pretty good budgets put out there that would start solving the problem, create the confidence in the world financial community that will cause us, give us the time to work out of our problems.
What happens to us if the euro melts down? I mean, how?
Well, ultimately what happens to you is the kids graduating from college won't be able to find a job. The 401k that you have that you think you're going to retire on, or your IRA or your pension, isn't going to be there enough to provide what you need, because we're going to, through debasing the currency and inflation, we'll have financial repression, which is the worst hidden tax of all. It'll wipe the middle class out. It'll be extremely hard on the poor. The very wealthy will do fine, but the fact is the country will be on its nose. You'll see 20% unemployment. You'll see a decline in growth of 10 to 12% per year. An unwinding because nobody has confidence in what we've done.
Okay, I've only got a minute here, but I want to ask you a real quick question, see if you can answer it in a minute, about regulation. This government with Cass Sunstein is so over-regulating us, you can't get the American engine, the small entrepreneur, to be able to produce anything. You don't have confidence, and you also have regulation out of control. Can you root out all of the crap that Cass Sunstein has gotten out in the last 4 years?
Yes, you can. If you have a president that's committed to do it, you can do a lot of it through executive order. You can do it through changes at the EPA. You can do it by withholding funding to those agencies until they correct the mistakes they've made. And I think you underestimate the damage that this administration has done in terms of business confidence and the ability to grow small and medium-sized businesses through regulation.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it. Keep up the fight. Name of the book
I
again.
will, Glenn. Good talking with you.
Thank you, sir. The name of the book is The Debt Bomb. And if I'm underestimating the problem of the damage that this president has done, we're in real trouble. Back in a minute with The Oval.
Hi, everyone. This is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. FreePAC is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepac.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
Have you considered silver as part of your portfolio strategy? Silver is the most affordable precious metal, and it has outperformed gold over the last 10 years. Maybe it's time you consider silver. Silver can help diversify and balance your portfolio with a tangible asset that can move independently from other financial assets. And silver enjoys the benefit of both investment and industrial demand. It's never too late to diversify your portfolio with precious metals. Let Goldline, a precious metals leader, help you get started. Call Goldline and get your free investor kit. Be sure to ask about our price guarantee program. Use your credit card for safety and convenience and enjoy free shipping. Call Goldline now and buy silver with confidence. Get started today with Goldline.
Are you a homeowner 62 or older? Are you looking to access cash from your home or eliminate your monthly mortgage payment? How about both? Then call the number on your screen. With a reverse mortgage, there are no monthly mortgage payments. You will still own your home, and you will have many options on how to receive your cash. Call now. It's time to get all the facts, and Reverse Mortgage Solutions is here to help.
Call 855-200-1039. That's 855-200-1039.
If you're living with diabetes and have Medicare or private insurance, here is some great news. Call United States Medical Supply today, and we'll send you the smallest glucose meter in the world, absolutely free.
It only takes a speck of blood, and it gives me my results in 5 seconds.
And there's no coding for easier, more accurate results.
Don't let diabetes get in the way of living. Give us a call today at United States Medical Supply and get the smallest meter in the world for free.
We just talked about Elizabeth Warren and the lies that are being told about her being Native American. She hasn't offered an apology. Instead, she's decided just to continue to lie. We have to draw a line in the sand. The lies that she's now telling are, honestly, they're insulting to anybody who has ever fought for civil rights. People risk their lives just in order to be free, to tell the truth. That's really what it was all based on, just to have access on the rights that God has given to all of us. Apparently, now it's just about the number of lunch activities, and lunch invites that you get, or if you can be elected to high office. The term civil rights is used far too often, far too carelessly, and by far too many people that don't really even care. I think this is happening. We're allowing it to happen because, quite honestly, we're not telling the stories of real courage and real struggle anymore. And even when you do read them, they aren't always the truth. This is actually a first edition copy of Up From Slavery, the story of Booker T. Washington. I hadn't read it until recently, and I was lucky enough to be able to read a first edition copy. Raj Nair, who works for GBTV, we were having lunch the other day, and I said, have you read this? This is one of the most incredible things. And I said, I tell you, by the time we have lunch next time, get this book and read it. Well, he went to the bookstore, and he got a copy in the bookstore. Unfortunately, the copy that he read confused him, because in his new version, there's an introduction written by a new college professor who wrote an intro saying, you know, we have to really look back at this because you really can't believe the stories about Booker T. Washington. A lot of this is untrue. Really? Nobody at the time thought it was untrue. We're losing true stories, the true stories in our own history about what civil rights really mean and the sacrifice that it takes. That's the focus tonight of The Oval. Hello, America. These days, America is hearing an awful lot about civil rights, and I believe deeply that we must always make sure that we as individuals and as a nation are protecting the civil rights of all of our citizens. After all, didn't we affirm this? This is our purpose, isn't it? The Declaration of Independence, all men are created equal and endowed by not their government, but by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. These words can only mean one thing. God endows man with rights. Therefore, it is the duty of every citizen, and indeed this country, to defend those rights for her citizens and all men. Today, I cast my eyes a century back to the struggle for civil rights. I can look at those chapters of America's history and see what it's trying to teach us. I look for heroes, people whose example can inspire us. Somebody that can give us hope, who lived through a very dark time and lasted for a better tomorrow. You don't really have to look far. There are heroes everywhere and dark times in American history. Booker T. Washington is the hero I want to talk to you about tonight. He was born in 1856. He was the son of a slave woman named James. His father was a white plantation owner. Booker T. Washington began at the lowest rung of the ladder in America and in American history, but he rose up quickly. He climbed every ladder rung. By his own efforts, he became America's premier voice for full civil rights in his time. He founded the Tuskegee Institute. He was a champion for the legal challenges to Jim Crow. He attracted the financial support of John Rockefeller, Julius Rosenwald, and others. He did these things so Southern blacks could build good schools. He was an advisor to presidents, and they listened to his advice. And over the course of his lifetime, he planted the seeds that became the civil rights movement that really we know in our lifetime as Martin Luther King Jr. Booker T. Washington was a giant, and he taught us important lessons about what civil rights really are and what they mean. Booker T. Washington understood the realities of his time. He knew there were bigots and racists all over America in the South and the North, just as there are today. But he wasn't naive. He knew that the fight for equality would take generations. There were 4 things that he focused on. He said these 4 things would lead to full civil rights for blacks and everybody. 4 things that he said black Americans had to do. First thing was industry. That meant work, an invention. So he trained generations of black Americans, men, women both. He trained as engineers and architects and other skilled professions. That way, white America could see that black Americans would work hard. He also wanted black Americans to see the dignity and reward that comes with hard work. It's called merit. Second thing, thrift. That meant savings and investment. Booker T. Washington saw that communities that don't invest in themselves go nowhere. So when someone wanted to build schools in a southern black community, he had the giants of the day that would build them all. But Booker T. Washington insisted that half of that money would come from the community. The lesson was clear. When a community contributes to its own future, it has a future. I contend the same thing is said for the individual. The third thing, intelligence. One of the great sins of racism was the theory that blacks weren't smart. They weren't as smart as whites. They couldn't learn. This view persists among bigots today. Washington knew the only way to fight falsehoods like that was with truth. So he made sure that black Americans would learn, could learn, and would learn well. He was an educator all his life because he believed that intelligence meant power. And he's right. 4, property. Black Americans sometimes didn't own their own property because they couldn't. But sometimes they wouldn't when they could. He insisted that blacks exercise their property rights because he knew that citizenship began with a right for a man to own something, own his own property, his own plot of land. He believed in the ownership of property, you would find freedom. Wow. Why isn't anybody in this office teaching that today? I think these lessons apply to all of us today, even those of us who think our civil rights are secure. They're not. They never are. If we don't demonstrate industry, practice thrift, develop our intelligence, and assert our rights to private property as individuals every day, what claim do we have to freedom? What good are civil rights if you don't act as a good citizen? What good is a right if you don't exercise your responsibility? Liberty, freedom, and dignity may be guaranteed to us, but we still have to exercise our rights and our responsibilities. God doesn't grant us equal rights so that we can hang around and do nothing. He wants us to be agents of freedom, active in our own life, masters of our own destiny, as individuals and as a country. Booker T. Washington knew this. He knew that civil rights are not bestowed on men by man. They are bestowed by God on men, and then they are earned every single day. And they are not earned once in one generation, but every day by every generation. Every American must understand that the strength and durability of their civil rights, all of us, depend on what we do with our own life. That's how this country became great. It's just that easy. That's how black Americans won their right. And that's the way we'll see a better tomorrow. Much, much better than today. Thanks. Thanks for watching. And may God bless the Republic. Good night, America, from Dallas.
Breaking news tonight. We've got real news. This just in.
Real news from the Blaze.
Welcome Welcome, everybody, to Real News from the Blaze. With financial issues dominating the headlines these days, one that's been absent from the national discussion is campaign finance reform. But with ads by special interest groups and super PACs flooding the airwaves, that might soon change. The Hill is reporting that Senator John McCain is in talks with Senate Democrats back at a new bill aimed at forcing high-end donors to disclose their political contributions. SC Cup, what is Senator McCain up to?
Well, the bill that you're talking about is called the Disclose Act, and it was introduced by Sheldon Whitehouse in March, and it would require any group that spends $10,000 or more on election ads or other political activity to disclose the amount and the donors within 24 hours. It also requires outside group advertisements to include a stand by your ad disclosure listing the biggest donors for the ad that you're going to see. Now, what kind of ads are we talking about? The ads we've all been seeing for months, the so-called super PAC ads like this one right here.
America moving forward or backward? Under Obama, 45% more people are on food
So this
stamps.
is an American Crossroads ad. It's typical of these kind of super PAC ads that run. And the fear behind having some kind of anonymity in these donations is that A, ads like this can be misleading, and B, political candidates could be open up to corruption. A big donor like a Shelley Adelson could end up making someone like Newt Gingrich beholden to him. I gave you all of this money, now you're elected, here's what I need you to do for me. That's the fear. But the bill has 43 Democratic sponsors, no Republicans yet. John McCain, surprise, surprise, has come out to potentially throw his weight behind this piece of legislation. We all, of course, remember McCain-Feingold, and I would like to point out that one of those authors, Russ Feingold, is no longer in office. Let that be a warning. So McCain, if he backs this piece of legislation, it's presumed that he would also collect other Republican moderates like Olympia Snowe and Susan Collins, et cetera, to sort of join him in this effort and really give some credence to this. Now, there have been challenges in the past to disclosure laws. Clarence Thomas, in fact, ruled on this. He was the lone dissenting view on this issue in a case called Nixon versus Shrink Missouri Government PAC in 2000. And we have this quote. He said, "In my view, the Constitution leaves it entirely up to citizens and candidates to determine who shall speak, the means they will use, and the amount of speech sufficient to inform and persuade." And very interestingly, McCain and the Democrats of this behind this Disclose Act will come up against serious resistance from folks like Mitch McConnell, minority leader, who actually was the lead plaintiff in the suit challenging McCain-Feingold in 2002. So there are a lot of implications for this. Just one I'd like to throw out, and then I'm going to open this up to the table, is the idea that anonymity in politics has real value, and there's a historic long tradition of anonymity in politics. Common Sense, The Crisis, these are two works later found out to be written by Thomas Paine, but that were published anonymously. Of course, the Federalist Papers, written by Publius, was sort of this anonymous work that we later found out to be written by Madison, Hamilton, and Jay. And then Die Weiße Rose, the white leaflets. Apologies to Will Kane, who hates it when anyone pronounces something in an international foreign language, but that is what they are, Die Weiße Rose, which were anti-Nazi graffiti and propaganda disseminated in opposition to Hitler's regime. Very important seminal works that really could only have been published with the veil of anonymity, because at the time they were so contentious. These ideas were so controversial. They required that shroud. I don't know if this is applicable, if they're analogous, but I'll throw it to the table. What do you guys think of this?
Absolutely, they're analogous. I mean, what's the point of an election but to challenge the powers that be? And if the powers that be happen to be malevolent, and there's no implication that any one particular power right now is, but if that is the case, And if that power is overexerting itself, wouldn't it take anonymous speech to challenge it? Wouldn't you have rebuke, rebuttal, retribution, jailing, death possibly for speaking out against power?
Sure.
Anonymity seems to be a necessary tool for political speech.
I think there are sort of two separate issues here, which is the identity of a speaker and the ideas that they're advocating. Is that necessary? Versus the identity of a supporter bankrolling a politician, and do we want transparency there so that we understand who that politician may feel himself to be beholden to?
Did you make a distinction?
Yes.
I'm not gathering it.
So, for example, with these ads, the requirement to disclose who is advocating the ideas expressed in this ad. So, for example, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, if they want to advocate against a tax issue or a regulation, do we really need to know that it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce advocating that idea? That's one issue on disclosure. The second one is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce gives candidate X $5 million. Should we know that that candidate received that money from that organization?
But they already do that with the super PACs. There's a difference between direct coordination and then speaking out. If you are somebody speaking out against somebody who may be in power later, you worry about corrupting the candidate. What about, you just said it, retribution?
Right.
I mean, if you think about old labor tactics, you think about some of these small business owners in Wisconsin that were told, put this in your window or else. There is an or else factor to speech. It might not be the president doing something today, but you might find your industry a little more regulated tomorrow.
Couldn't these things happen anyway, though? I mean, who's to say that the ads won't be misleading anyway, just because we know who's behind them? I find myself wondering what, at the end of the day, this is really going to accomplish.
Well, and my other question, and I'm sure Will feels strongly about this too, is why are we making a distinction between $1 and $1,000 or $1,000 and $10,000? If money is corrupting, then what's the difference? We should treat it all.
Look at our tax code. The more you have, the more.
Yeah. Well, but why is that?
The argument from those that support measures such as the Disclose Act is that democracy is built upon the concept of one man, one vote.
Right.
And that when one man is capable of putting, in the case of Sheldon Adelson, millions of dollars towards one person's candidacy, you have distorted that concept of one man.
Vote once, though.
That is the obvious rebuttal, that you are mixing up influence and voting. You are mixing up, the ability to persuade and voting.
But you disagree with that?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah,
What do I do if I'm a guy watching the Obama Steele ad and I say, wait a second, Mitt Romney was not with Bain. He left 2 years prior to that Steele. What am I supposed to do if you want to talk about corruption and fairness and influence? How do I, the voter, say to the president, you're lying? Who's going to do something about it?
Well, I mean,
Who's
Ashley Banfield tried. She tried when she was talking to Ben LaBolt earlier, going up against Obama's campaign. She tried to take him to task. It really is the job of the media. Unfortunately, as we all know, hold your breath, Andrew. Unfortunately, as we all know, the media has a terrible track record in terms of keeping a Democratic president honest. They really don't take him to task generally. And examples of it are so rare that we all read about it.
Now, what's key here also is that McCain wants to make sure that the unions are on the same page as well. In the past, you had corporations. You have the Democrats constantly saying, well, we need to know what these big corporations are doing, but the unions, you don't need to worry about them. They don't count. Now, McCain is coming out and saying, no, there needs to be some parity here between these big corporations and these wealthy individuals and the unions. Now, if you put it on that page, I can see some value. If you're going to say, sunlight is the best disinfectant here, then maybe it's not so bad to know who's contributing and why.
At the price of what, though? At the price of anonymous free speech? That's the thing. Some of the arguments of those that are for the Disclose Act and against anonymous campaign contributions, the costs they point out are real. There is a real cost that Newt Gingrich would be beholden to Sheldon Adelson. Sure. That is very logical. In fact, it takes an extreme amount of irrationality to assume that he wouldn't be beholden to Sheldon Adelson. But at the cost of anonymous political speech, that's the debate we have. That is the tension that we have. And I would like to think that if Newt Gingrich were capable of being elected as president and the voters then saw someone who was beholden to one man, he would be a one-term president or less.
But let me ask this about transparency and knowing as much about your politician as you can. For example, are they getting the bulk of their donations from some industry that then might be driving that politician's vote? You have that on the one side, and I actually support that, of having as much information. George Will, for example, he said, give as much, we should allow people to give as much as they want. We should just know where it's coming from. But the flip side of that, of course, is in this campaign cycle, we have seen the Obama administration targeting these donors quite personally and questionable business practices. So should we think about anonymity in terms of protecting the reputations of these donors? Or, you know what, if you want to get into the political ring, it ain't beanbag.
I mean, I don't. In the case of that argument, I feel like if you're going to make the donations, then stand behind them. I mean, I don't want to protect. I'm not out to protect those people in terms of, well, you know, your anonymity will enable you to support someone that maybe you publicly don't want people to know you're supporting.
So this appeals to you, Jedi, the Disclose Act?
It appeals to me on some level because I understand the argument. I wasn't supporting it when it was unions had a huge advantage versus corporations, individuals. But now if we can bring some parity to that, I do understand the argument of people who say, you know what, if you're going to talk about transparency all day long, then show us the transparency. Show us and let us make an educated decision. Maybe it'll matter. Maybe it will affect the process. Maybe it won't. But just put all of the information out there.
But will this give an unfair advantage to corporations like General Electric, which can go right to the media to disseminate its political ideas? It doesn't have to give money to a super PAC. It doesn't have to spend a dime. In fact, it can just go right to, you know, its favorite outlet. And you all know what I'm saying. So in that case, corporations would actually be given an advantage by the Disclose Act.
Yeah, it's a great point.
There's also an advantage to incumbents here. You notice that incumbents really love anything that stifles more speech in campaigns. I mean, that's we all know that John McCain and Russ Feingold, you said he was voted out, but they were a lot of the when you see this sort of bipartisan stuff,
absolutely.
It's usually incumbent
versus why
upstart.
Obama and the campaign and the Democrats are so anti-super PACs right now. In 4 years, if Obama wins this year, they will be using super PACs just as much as Republicans will.
And I would encourage you to distinguish transparency in governance from transparency in campaigning. Not the same thing. And I think under this law, you have to recognize that Common Sense or the Federalist Papers wouldn't be printed if the print run cost more than $10,000.
Absolutely. I agree. I hear all points.
It's a
very
complicated
complicated issue.
All right, after the break, Greece may be the first domino to topple in the Eurozone. Experts are very worried about financial contagion. Will our economy be infected too? We'll find out next.
Food independence, emergency preparedness, self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com. Get our survival seed vault and feed your family from your own garden for just $37.95. Our non-hybrid heirloom seeds are genuinely American, just like you. Your survival needs and survival seeds are at MyPatriotSupply.com. MyPatriotSupply.com. Self-reliance. MyPatriotSupply.com.
Hi everyone, this is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. FreePAC is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepac.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
Hi, I'm Joe Gray with the GoJo Hands-Free, the only device on Earth that's truly hands-free. These things are not hands-free. You stick them in your ears, gross, but you still have to hold your phone. And these are not legal for hands-free driving. The GoJo goes on in 1 second. Hello? 1 Mississippi. Hey Mom, I can't talk right now. And it works with all phones. Flip phones, cordless phones, even landlines. And pop it off. Any phone, big or small, even the most radical moves won't knock it off. The GoJo goes on with one hand, so you can keep your eyes on the road. I love it.
It's true hands-free.
Call now and I'll send you 2 GoJos for just $10. And I'll throw in my Super Grip mat absolutely free. It grips and holds your phone, music player, or anything else you can think of. Call now and I'll double the entire offer. Just pay processing and handling. That's 4 GoJos and 2 Super Grip mats for just $10.
To order for $10 plus processing and handling, call 1-800-493-0575 or order online at gojohandsfree.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Markets around the world took a tumble today as the latest news out of Greece sent investors running. The troubled nation appointed an interim government as the country's most recent election failed to form a ruling coalition. It's just the latest sign that Greece is approaching an economic and political breaking point that some believe threatens the entire Eurozone and the United States right along with it. Well, Kane, it's been touch and go today. Can you fill us in? What's happening?
Well, what we wanted to find out and what I wanted to talk about tonight was what would happen in the event of a chain reaction of Greece leaving the Eurozone. If these banks in Greece fail, and therefore Greece fails and leaves the Eurozone, what would happen? What would that domino effect look like? Now, what you don't hear are producers around this building cursing me right now because I said in order to do that, I actually want some dominoes and I want a map, and they have been scrambling all day to find me dominoes and a map. And I should say at the outset, there is a greater than 0 chance this experiment falls flat on its face, in which case you will have to forgive me and we'll just get along together. But what we have here is a map of Europe, and in effect, the Eurozone with all the big players, from Greece to Italy to Spain, Portugal, and Germany. And then, of course, there beyond the great unknown is the Atlantic and what lies beyond. What I want to talk about is what happens in the event that Greece pulls out of the Eurozone. Let's talk about a few of the events that will lead up to that. Let's talk about the first domino. This domino is the political domino in Greece. Voters in Greece decide they do not like austerity measures, they do not like what's being imposed on them by Germans and Europeans, and they vote to vote out the centrist socialists and conservatives and vote in some parties like neo-Nazis, aka the Golden Dawn, and some real hardcore lefties like communists. And shockingly, that didn't work. That hasn't worked out. Because voters essentially said, domino 2, we want to reject austerity. We're not really into that whole austerity thing, but we'd like to stay in the Eurozone. Of course, that's not really possible. You can't do that. So as the governance fails and voters reject reality, what happens is you have a run on the banks. But actually what we're calling in Greece right now is a jog on the banks. All the Greeks see the handwriting on the wall, and what they've learned is we're not going to be in the euro for very long. And they're terrified of that fact because all of their valuable euros are about to be turned into worthless drachmas, which leads us to finally this domino, domino number 3, the ECB. This is the European Central Bank. You can't just pull money out of the Greek banks. Where does it come from? The Greek banks have no money. Well, it comes from the European Central Bank, which essentially means Germany. But the Greek banks are insolvent. You're throwing good money after bad. So what are the Germans or the ECB going to say? They're going to say no. And in fact, we saw the news today. They have said no. And we saw earlier in the week that the Greeks did begin to pull out their money to the tune of $700 billion on Monday. That leads us to the final bank, the final domino, which is Greece falls out of the euro. If you're printing euros, you're out of the Eurozone, and Greece says, we're out of the euro. What happens in that case? Then the dominoes begin to fall. Look at that. It worked except for Italy. What you saw here illustrated to you is contagion. This is contagion. This is fear spreading across Europe. And all of a sudden, countries across Europe, like Spain and Portugal, who have balance sheets that look, all of a sudden, whoa, we look a lot like Greece. Greece wasn't supported by the European Central Bank, and Greece is now out of the Eurozone. What about us? That doesn't work. So what happens is now depositors and investors in countries like Spain and Greece are going, I'm terrified that my euros are about to turn into worthless liras in Italy and pesetas in Spain, and they start pulling out their money out of Spanish and Italian banks, and investors start selling their assets in Spain and Italy. And of course, you're wondering, look, if the European Central Bank and the Germans didn't step in for Greece, are they going to step in for Spain and Italy? Now, at this point, we talk about what's going on in these countries. And you have to say, Germany has a different attitude toward Spain and Italy than they do towards Greece. Greece, Germany kind of just considered cheated their way into the euro. Never really wanted them there in the first place and thought, actually, the Greeks are just a bunch of lazy people sitting on beaches on the southern coast, so we're fine letting them fall out of the euro. But Spain and Italy, now you're talking about the end of the Eurozone. And as these depositors and investors pull out of Spain and Italy, you have another choice. Will the European Central Bank step in? Will they back up Spanish and Italian banks? Will the Germans, and that's who this will come down to, step in and back up these countries to save the euro? And if they do not, then the final dominoes fall and the Eurozone is kaput. No more Eurozone. Now, that leads us to the final unknown. What happens if the Eurozone fails? If the Eurozone is gone? That's our final line of dominoes right here. These are the ones spreading across the Atlantic. if the Eurozone fails, these dominoes start to fall towards the United States, and we head into the great economic unknown. That brings me to Veronique Derougy. She's a senior research fellow at George Mason University's Mercatus Center. She's also a contributor to National Review and Reason magazine. So, Veronique, I just laid out what I think most would say is a worst-case scenario for the Eurozone.
No.
What, a likely scenario?
No, I actually think your U.S. exposure and all the other exposure of Germany and France, I mean, could come up, you know, before. I mean, I think the U.S. is already exposed to some extent, and we don't know in which order it's going to happen, but I don't think our exposure will only start if the entire Eurozone collapses.
Okay, well, first of all, tell me this, Veronique. I understand you're rejecting some of that premise, but how likely is it you think the Eurozone fails?
Well, I think it's how likely is it that some of the Eurozone fails, and that's a very likely possibility. The question then, I mean, I think it's, I mean, I can't imagine at this point that the Greeks are going to be able to stay in. I don't think there's any acceptable policy that they will accept, or that the German will accept, or that there's even anything that can be done to keep them in. Then the next question is, if they're out, who's next? I mean, right. there will be a run. It's very likely.
And what kind of time frame? What kind of time frame do you think for that run you're talking about? Are you talking months? Or are we talking years?
No, I don't think. If it starts happening, it will happen really fast. It will happen very fast. But the question is, how far will it go, right? So once Greece goes, you know, the run on, I'm assuming, Portugal, Spain, Italy will happen. The question, and you're right to say, you know, Germany feels very differently towards certainly Italy and Spain, and one of the reasons is actually that Greece and that Italy and Spain are actually very wealthy countries, unlike Portugal and Greece. And for that reason, think about the way we've been thinking in the U.S. in terms of too big to fail, right? Then the European Central Bank and the German might be willing to take actually drastic steps to kind of prevent that.
That's right, and that's what we don't know. Will the European Central Bank and will Germany step in to save Spain and Italy? But it sounds to me, where you started this conversation with me, is regardless, whether or not Spain and Italy stay in the Eurozone, or whether the Eurozone falls apart, it is going to affect us here in the United States, and it is going to affect us in the short term. Let's talk about that. Explain to me how this mess spills across the Atlantic and lands on our shores.
Well, I mean, U.S. banks have very large exposures in Europe, and you know, this is a very global economy. This is a very flexible capital market, and in the same way as our financial crisis made theirs you know, bigger and spread to Europe. I'm not saying our financial crisis, you know, caused theirs, because I mean, they have their problems of their own, but it will affect us. I mean, U.S. banks have large exposure in Europe, and I just can't imagine that it won't affect us. For a while, it may actually affect us in a positive way, which is, while all this money that's being taken out of these failing countries, and they may end up, you know, in the U.S., but you know, who knows exactly how far it will go.
Veronique, Amy here. I was looking at the BBC.com website and the timeline on the euro as a currency. And what struck me is how quickly it has spiraled to this point. The euro was only introduced in 1999, and here we are just 12 years later with the euro facing its biggest crisis and apparently not handling it very well. So my question to you, Veronique, is, should the euro exist, especially when you consider that France and Germany and all of these banks, they lent to Greece willingly. They exposed themselves to this risk by choice, knowing Greece was, you know, basically quite infamous for its corruption.
Yeah, but I mean, Yes, I mean, I agree with you, but the Eurozone is a really terrible idea from the beginning. I mean, only an idea like this can only come out of the mind of, centralizer, planners, bureaucrats. I'm sorry, you can't take, 12, there was 12 at the beginning countries that are as different as these are. Some are rich, some are poor, and just say artificially, this is an optimal currency zone, and we're gonna pick. I mean, it made no sense. And there were a lot of people, by the way, at the time I lived in France, warning that this would happen. And it was kind of interesting because the beginning of, in 2005, there were a lot of the Euro skeptics who were like, well, I mean, it's weird, but maybe we were wrong. But no, they weren't. I mean, this was a terrible idea. And on top of that, it actually encouraged the worst type of behavior. Greece, that's a poor country, actually kind of believed in the illusion that it could actually spend away because it was getting all this money, and that it would never have to repay. There would be no consequences for fiscal irresponsibility.
Veronique Jedediah here. We're in the midst of a heated election season right now, this 2012, and I'm just wondering what you think the political implications will be for Barack Obama or for potentially Mitt Romney, given this situation.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, like, the main way, unless the entire Eurozone collapses, then it takes us with them, right? And I suspect that will be really bad for President Obama. But I can tell you, like, the main way I think this is going to be played out politically is if you're going to have the Obama team saying, see, these guys, they tried austerity, they cut spending, terrible idea, look what's happening to them. And hopefully the guys on the other side are going to be saying, wait a minute. No, they tried what you guys want. They tried the balanced approach, the one where you pretend you're going to cut spending and where instead you raise taxes. So this is, I mean, who knows if the Eurozone goes away, but if it doesn't, I can tell you the austerity card is going to be played, and hopefully the people, when that card is played, they will have the proper answer.
I can tell you guys that I think that debate could be one that falls on deaf ears, because Veronique points out that our banks have exposure to European banks, but you're talking about also, should the Eurozone collapse or even a partial collapse, a contraction in trade, and Europe is one of our big trading partners. You're talking about an economic contraction here in the United States that, regardless of blame, that's going to affect Barack Obama's re-election hopes.
Yeah, I think it's hard to believe that such a large economic bloc could go into, like, deep economic problems without it affecting us. I mean, it's almost inconceivable. That being said, look, I mean, a few months ago, we were talking about Italy. I mean, interest rates were going up and had gone above, this threshold of 6.3%, which all economists had said, after that, it's, the big fall. And it didn't happen. So there is a possibility that something that, because, I mean, this is totally, at least territory that we can't remember, that, it's like, it's unknown territory, certainly, to my knowledge, but maybe it's just something we've forgotten about.
All
so
right.
Who knows?
Well, Veronique, we will try to look for the silver lining in that and hope that these firewalls that are supposed to have been erected will work. Thanks for sharing your expertise. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Tonight's top 3 stories as determined by you when we return.
This is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. FreePAC is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepac.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
The TRS Files, True Tax Resolution Stories.
My name is Gibb, and I am not an actor. As a result of my dealings with Tax Resolution Service,
my tax burden to the IRS went from more than $35,000 to zero.
If you owe the IRS over $20,000 or more in back taxes, have unfiled returns, or are under audit, call Tax Resolution Services now, 888-7804-TAX, or visit taxresolution.com/GBTV.
Preparation, focus, hard work. It's a personal commitment. It's what drives me. It gives me the confidence to look my opponent in the eye and say, game on. Preparing for life's future challenges is just as important. Food Insurance Emergency Food Supply gives me the same assurance that I'm ready for whatever comes my way. Preparation is everything. Order today at foodinsurance.com.
Tatler reusable canning lids. Family owned since 1976. That's right, Tatler reusable canning lids. Yes, reusable with a lifetime guarantee. Made in America, BPA free. Tatler reusable canning lids, because those who can do. Get rid of the disposable lid. Go to reusablecanninglids.com. Tatler reusable canning lids.
Well, it's a rare treat that we get to have the top 3 stories delivered live and in person by the editor-in-chief of The Blaze himself, Scott Baker. Welcome. Hey, good to have you.
I just wanted to see if I could make it past security, and it was a little rigorous, but I did. So.
No Kissinger treatment?
Well, not right there. I did go through TSA at LaGuardia. That's a different matter. But so how are you guys?
You almost look like a hologram when you're not like Skyping with an airport terminal. You don't even look real right now. You know, it's so weird.
And I was going to try. I literally was ready to do it, and then there was something else happened for you guys, and there was that segment. But I was going to Skype you from the Branson Airport in Missouri last week.
Oh, I've been there.
You missed out on that.
That's a good-looking airport.
I think, with some reasonable degree, that would have been the first Skype ever from the Branson Airport. That's just
for sure. To watch all the musicals or something?
It's a long story, and I can't really get into it. But it did involve going.
Well,
I went from Pittsburgh to Tampa, Tampa to Dallas, Dallas to Springfield, drove to Branson, Branson to Atlanta, trying to come here to New York. And then missed my flight and had to go to Atlanta.
That wasn't rehearsed, was it?
No, wow. It wasn't. All right, so here's what we got. And it's almost an all Glenn Beck lineup tonight. Now, we try on The Blaze to be very diverse in what we do, but this is just how it happened. I can't, but 3 of the 4 stories. So top 3. Right now, the number 3 story is the 50 resignations at this Christian university that had put out a more sort of declarative statement about their pledge. Now, I went to a Christian college. I had to sign a pledge of behavior.
Is this Franciscan?
No, I don't think. No, it's not Franciscan, but they are also dealing with this. 50 faculty and staff have resigned now in protest as they strengthen this pledge to deal with homosexual acts and other acts, not just that. All right, now we get to the Glenn Beck stuff. Ready? Number 2 story on The Blaze right now is the Glenn Beck history lesson for Ava Longoria. And it won't take too much time because I already gave you the history of Branson. Branson was never a part of Mexico, and Glenn spent a lot of time educating Ava Longoria about the reality of Mexican history and U.S. history. Now, number 1 story is, we did a whole sequence of stories on The Blaze about the expose that Glenn did last week about the real Obama. Do you know the real Obama? We had pieces of GBTV, and now, thank the powers that be at GBTV and Glenn, they've made that entire episode available. For the very first time, we have the whole episode is up, and that's on The Blaze right now. This leads me to my story to Boost, which is about Glenn. You say, now, what else could there be about Glenn? Now, if I just said to you, well, what if we took, like just this performance art, what if we took Glenn's interview with Sarah Palin, transcribed that, gave them to character actors, and reenacted that as a date?
Oh.
Sort of like slow jamming the news, but...
Actually happened. Okay. Performance artists in Los Angeles, big paying audience, and they reenact the Glenn Beck Sarah Palin interview as though it were a date. There is some video of this.
Wow.
Yes, we have that on The Blaze.
Although I would have to think like that would be like the least romantic date ever, to be sitting across from someone just discussing like the politics.
Yeah, who's your favorite founder?
Right.
I don't know. But when I'm looking, I don't know yet. What I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well, that's kind of like
weird.
I'm guessing that's like a lot of your dates. That's what I mean. But I'm trying to find out what I don't know is this artist, and I just sent an instant message. Had she ever gotten a like a federal grant? That's what I want to know next.
Oh.
Wow, you operate on an entirely different level.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I think so. Very caffeinated environment.
All right, well, we love you operating from the table. I
Thank
hope you'll come back soon.
Okay.
All right, good luck with your next flight route.
Oh, wait till you see tomorrow night's appearance on Real News.
All right, sounds good. A political upset in Nebraska last night, but is it one that the Tea Party can put in their own column? We'll have that story when we come back.
Hi everyone, this is Amelia from FreedomWorks, here to invite you to a very special event. FreePAC is a national gathering of Americans interested in restoring freedom. This year's event will feature speeches from Glenn Beck, Dick Armey, Matt Kibbe, and many of the biggest names in the freedom movement. So go to freepac.com today to pre-register and help restore liberty in your community and across the nation.
Listen up, America! The price of life insurance has gone down 60% over the last 15 years. Many Americans know they need it, and some that have life insurance know they don't have enough. How would your family get by without you? How are you planning for the uncertainties of life? Guarantee your family $200,000, $400,000, $500,000, $750,000 or more with a term life insurance policy that costs up to 3 times less than other competitors. For example, a healthy 40-year-old man can get a $250,000 term life insurance policy for $16 a month. Don't spend more than you have to on term life insurance. Find out how easy it is to protect the ones you love. The quote is free and there are no obligations. Listen up, America. Call now.
Call 800-488-5317. That's 800-488-5317.
Are you a homeowner 62 or older? Are you looking to access cash from your home or eliminate your monthly mortgage payment? How about both? Then call the number on your screen. With a reverse mortgage, there are no monthly mortgage payments. You will still own your home, and you will have many options on how to receive your cash. Call now. It's time to get all the facts, and Reverse Mortgage Solutions is here to help.
Call 855-200-1039. That's 855-200-1039.
Upset in Nebraska last night for state senator and weekend rancher Deb Fischer, who won the GOP's Senate primary after a last-minute endorsement from Sarah Palin. She defeated both the Republican establishment candidate and a Tea Party favorite who was running as the conservative choice and had the support of both Senator Jim DeMint and the Club for Growth. So do we put Ms. Fisher's win in the Tea Party column? We'll talk to Andy Roth, Vice President of Government Affairs for Club for Growth, in just a moment. But first, our very own Jedediah is going to give us her first, as you put it, maiden voyage presentation.
Yes. Well, this was a huge upset. Up until a couple of weeks ago, she was double digits behind either of the other two candidates. And we have the stats to show you. It was Deb Fischer got 41% of the vote, John Bruning got 36%, and Don Stenberg got 19%. Now, why was this a big deal? Well, first of all, let's just say, who is this woman? Because she sort of popped up out of nowhere. She's an 8-year state senator. She's a rural rancher. She has a pretty solid conservative record in the legislature. She has a background in education. She's someone who presented herself as a mom, as a wife, as a business owner, not as a conventional politician. Now, she didn't have a lot of establishment support, which is why she was in last place for a very long time. But the other two candidates had hefty support, as you said. Bruning had backing of much of the GOP establishment, as well as the Tea Party Express, Rick Santorum and Mike Huckabee, some pretty hefty names. Stenberg had the support of Club for Growth, Freedom Works, and Jim DeMint's Senate Conservative Fund, which put about $1.1 million worth of ads into that particular campaign. So she was at a huge disadvantage. How did she turn this around? Well, one major thing happened, and that's what you mentioned. She got the endorsement of Alaska Governor Sarah Palin. And we actually have that quote for you. Sarah Palin has congratulated her today and says, "The message from the people of Nebraska is simple and powerful. America is looking for real change in Washington, and common sense conservative Deb Fischer represents that change." Now, I think she hit the nail on the head with that one. I don't think personally that you can define this as an establishment race versus a Tea Party race. Why? Although there was an establishment candidate, the Tea Party was split. You had the Tea Party Express over here, Jim DeMint over here, Sarah Palin over here. But what you can define it as is a non-politician politician who really took the cake. So you had a non-politician politician resonated with voters, endorsed by a very powerful non-politician politician, which is Sarah Palin, who came in. Like her or not, this woman is a firecracker in terms of endorsements. If you look back to 2010, you see that she endorsed over 90 candidates. She had over 70% success rate with that. So I think that that was ultimately what pushed this over the edge. Now, I want to ask Andy Roth, who's the Vice President of Government Affairs for Club for Growth. I think we have him with us. I want to ask him what he thought. Andy, hi, how are you? What did you think? Good. What did you think was the key factor that pushed this over the edge? And do you think that the money that you put into these ads in order to bring Bruning down a little bit wound up pushing Fisher over the top once she had that Sarah Palin endorsement in her back pocket?
Yeah, I think actually you got to go back in time a little bit when a lot of these endorsements were made. Fisher was barely, and she was in the single digits, so it was a movement conservative versus an establishment candidate race. It set up just like it did in Indiana with Lugar and Murdoch, and in future races that we think are going to occur in Utah and Texas and Arizona. So that's how it shaped up when a lot of groups got in. I think the Tea Party Express got in even earlier when the race hadn't even matured to a point where that movement versus establishment setup was even created. And then I think that the voters were just hit with ads on both sides of the Bruning Stenberg thing that I think that they ultimately looked for a third choice. I definitely think that Palin provided a bump to Fisher, but the race was trending already in her direction by the time Palin got on board.
Let me ask you this. Do you feel comfortable calling this a Tea Party victory?
I think it's one of those cup half full sort of situations. We're upset that Stenberg did not win, but we're also relieved that Bruning did not win as well. The fact that a third candidate in the party won is you have mixed feelings about it, but you hope that she goes to Washington and does some good.
Hey, Andy, it's SE Cup. I really enjoyed the Club for Growth list that came out ranking the Tea Party candidates on their percentage of Tea Party-ness earlier this week. Really interesting stuff. What is, for our viewers at home who didn't get a chance to look at it, how would you sum up your findings there?
Well, the genesis of this list was born by the fact that every time we turned on the TV, the mainstream media was talking about the Tea Party freshmen and about how the radical freshmen were radicalizing the Republican Party in Washington. And that didn't make sense to us because there are a lot of freshmen in the House of Representatives that are just as liberal as a lot of Democrats. And so we wanted to explain that. The Club for Growth has an annual scorecard that comes out every year, and we released our 2011 scorecard several weeks ago, but now we want to re-release it, so to speak, and just show the freshmen so that people can get an idea of what how the freshmen, all 87 of them, voted on economic issues, and that's what we did.
Hey, Andy, this is Amy. We were talking about Deb Fisher and this primary upset, and in the local press, they were giving a lot of credit to the founder of TD Ameritrade and his last-minute 11th hour contribution of $200,000 in ads over the weekend against Deb Fisher's opponent, Joe Bruning, rather. And it kind of sounded personal. Joe Ricketts, being that TD Ameritrade founder, creating an anyone but Bruning ad. And my question to you is, when you had Tea Party, different factions, Tea Party support between each of these GOP primary candidates, did it boil down to actually a question of character?
I don't know about that. You know, in the last 2 weeks of a race, that's when voter attention is at the highest. So I think that his ad definitely had a lot of impact. Coming from Omaha myself, before I came to D.C., I lived in Omaha for 4 years. I'm an avid Cubs fan. The Ricketts family owned the Cubs, and I know his thinking very well, and it's very strictly devoted to economic issues and reducing the size of government. The one thing that unified Mr. Ricketts, the Club for Growth, and Senator DeMint is that we didn't agree that Bruning was the right candidate in this race. But he did air an ad in support of Fisher, and I think that had just as much effect to help her as the Palin endorsement did.
Hey, Andy, this is Will Kane. You know, looking at Nebraska, it strikes me that you have a lot of people, a lot of players who have laid the claim of the Tea Party mantle, have claimed it. From you guys to Sarah Palin to Rick Santorum to Mike Huckabee, who all opted for a different candidate in this Nebraska race. And I'm wondering how representative of that is the Tea Party movement at a national level? Does the Tea Party suffer from some sort of, I don't know, lack of cohesion, lack of unity that needs to be resolved?
Well, I would push back a little bit on that with regard to Santorum and Romney. I don't think that they identify with Tea Party politics at all, at least on economic issues.
Not if you ask them.
Oh, well, certainly. I mean,
Santorum
when
and
you talk
Huckabee?
about, well, when you talk about the Tea Party politics, broadly speaking, on all three pillars of the issues, economic, social, and foreign, I suspect that you can make a claim that they're good on the other two. But on economic issues, Santorum and Romney and Huckabee, I don't believe qualify. So you're right in the sense that the message is getting muddled, and that would be my explanation for it.
Hey, Andy. Andrew Wilkow. How you doing? It fascinates me how at first Republicans sort of didn't know how to handle the Tea Party. Then it became like the cool kid thing. Then whether or not they actually believed in limited government, low taxes, breaking up corporatism, returning power to the states, they were like, yeah, I'm in for the Tea Party. And then you get Newt Gingrich speaking at a Tea Party, then endorsing someone like Dede Scozzafava, and you're like, well, where did this all come from? It seems like the establishment people, once they realized it was a threat, tried to join the Tea Party and then turn around and say the establishment was bad, even though they're really establishment.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's claiming to be a Tea Party candidate nowadays, but the proof is in the pudding, and once you get to Washington, you have to vote up or down on various bills and amendments that increase or decrease the size of government. And that's what you're judged on. And it's difficult to judge candidates that have no voting record. But once you get into office, you have to defend your record. And that's why with this freshman report that we came out with, we think that a lot of people need to be called to the mat for their record when they say they're Tea Party, and the voting record proves that they're not.
So, Essie, I want to ask you this question. I read a local columnist complaining, actually, about the influence of all of these national Tea Party groups, whether they were Jim DeMint or Sarah Palin, these outside influences in Nebraska's election and pushing each of these candidates and basically kind of stepping on the state party and the state party's power. Do you think that there's anything to that we love the Tea Party, but don't we want to keep it local?
I'm sure they do. I mean, I'm sure they don't want these interlopers, you know, these famous celebrities coming in and taking away their power, their influence, their role in state politics. But I think, especially when you look at Nebraska, I mean, this is not how it was supposed to go. You have two Tea Party candidates and an establishment candidate. If you're looking at this, you would assume the Tea Party candidates would split the votes and the establishment candidate, of course, would win. I don't think you can underestimate or overstate the influence of Sarah Palin. I mean, you went through the timeline of this. Sarah Palin made the difference.
She made the difference.
I don't care whether you like her or you don't like her, or you think she's a celebrity or what, she is still incredibly influential. And the fact that she has not gotten into every single local race, that she is rationing out her support, makes her even more valuable.
Which leads to the question, was this a Tea Party win, which is where you started us, Jedediah, that Sarah Palin essentially defeated Jim DeMint on behind one candidate and Club for Growth behind another candidate. And to take this back to the national level, what does that mean? Does that mean that there are different kinds of Tea Party candidates? Is there one kind of Tea Party candidate? What is the Tea Party?
The Tea Party is about ideas. It's not about one person. So I don't think that if Jim DeMint's candidate had won, I don't think it would be a Tea Party loss. I think there is something to be said for the establishment candidate because he was entrenched in politics. He represented a lot of things politically that were unsavory to Tea Party people. Then you had two other candidates, and I think Jim DeMint got behind the person who he thought could win. I think there was an electability factor. Sarah Palin does not endorse based on electability. In fact, she goes into a lot of races where candidates are underdogs, and she supports them and hopes to take them over the line. That's exactly what happened here.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jedediah, and thanks, Andy Roth. Next up, the Island of Misfit Stories after the break.
Consider every major city in America, how does it get its water supply? Consider that every major city in America, its average food supply on hand is 21 to 28 days. Consider, where do we get our medication? Consider what happens in nursing homes and hospitals. What happens to our transportation grid? Anything driven that, well, most of them have computers in them, they're all gone.
Puerto Ricans are still struggling with whether they want to remain independent or become the 51st state.
You know who I'd like to have as the vice president nominee for Mitt Romney? From what I know.
Right. Yeah, the governor
is the governor of Puerto Rico. I mean, wouldn't that send a signal? Wouldn't that be great? And this guy is
he doesn't
apparently
look like you, though. That's the only problem. Did you consider that?
We gotta scrap that. Hope that most conservatives are blind. Or every time he's on TV, we'll just say, "Hey, what's that behind you?" And then he can give his answer.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Jeez.
The statehood. So
will Rubio help him, or will he?
Well, I think it's funny because I think the argument between, will Latinos now switch over to Mitt Romney because he's going to have a Latino running mate, is saying that women would have voted for Palin just because she was a woman.
Right.
So easy to look at, so hard to listen to. It is so wrong, isn't it? Oh my gosh.
Tonight, the mainstream media's rush to sensationalize stories before details fully come to light comes into stark focus in our first Misfit story. Jedediah, start us off.
Yes, well, we've all been hearing a lot about the Zimmerman case, and we're discovering now that he did make a visit to a family doctor. We knew that. Well, it turns out he had 2 black eyes and a broken nose, so he did have a lot of injuries that are being reported now. 2 cuts to the back of his head, a pair of black eyes, and a nose fracture. So the real story here is that the mainstream media called everything on this case before they had any facts. Now we're finding out a lot of facts that are going to bring a lot more complexity to the issue, that are going to perhaps make us rethink what we've evaluated here. And the lesson is for the media. Don't jump the gun. Wait for the story to be told. Let's evaluate things as they come in, because they were saying initially he had no evidence of injury. That's obviously not the case as being reported by this doctor.
Can I ask you a quick question? Do you think that the public was as willing to jump the gun as the media, or that it's kept an open mind and is going to take in these new details?
I think it's going to be difficult now to backtrack. I think you had a lot of members of the new media and the blogosphere that were trying to say, hold on a second, let's not call this case, let's not decide this case before we have the facts. And those people will probably be out there saying, told you so, you know, this is what you need to do. But I think a lot of people who initially ran with it because they had an agenda in mind. They had a narrative that they wanted to be told. Whether that was the story or not, that was the narrative they wanted to be told. And that's hard to reverse once it's set out there.
Indeed. Andrew, what do you got?
Well, we've all seen the pictures of Jay-Z in the Situation Room. We've all seen Barack Obama actually imitating Jay-Z. And I saw this story in Rolling Stone that Jay-Z has come out and said he's now a big supporter of gay marriage, something he clearly didn't believe in when 99 Problems came out. What? Am I not clearly the most hip-hop guy at this table?
That's really funny.
Anyway, it's just funny to me as somebody who worked in music radio, likes heavy metal, punk rock, that when music becomes politically correct, it loses its edge the way rock did in the 90s. It's not scary anymore. Rap used to scare government. Now you have this sort of bromance between the president and Jay-Z. And I actually have Jay-Z in his own words on this one.
I've always thought it as something that's still holding the country back. You know, what people do in their own homes is, their business, and you choose to love whoever you love. That's their business. It's no different than discriminating against blacks. It's discrimination, plain and simple.
Bottom line, edge gone. Edge gone.
Do you think, though, that
is
maybe
gone.
his near $500 million fortune might have something to do with
That probably
as
had
well?
something to do with it. I don't know. It feels to me like the way metal went in the 90s and rock went in the 90s, it became so PC and cause driven and became boring. I just feel like this is sort of that.
He's evolving.
Yeah, he gets to have, lunch with the president.
I remember good old Chrissy and,
Will Kane, what do you have?
one of the last sanctuaries of a self-free zone, you know, like, I don't know, there aren't many. It's hard to come up with few. But the airplane is one where you don't get to use this thing. You don't talk to people and text, and you have serenity. Has come to an end. Virgin Atlantic.
Oh, thank God.
You knew it was going to be Richard Branson. You knew it.
Thank God.
Virgin Atlantic is going to allow passengers to make and receive phone calls during flights. They're going to allow them to send text messages and receive text messages, access email in your BlackBerry. But here's the kicker, and I got to be honest, during some of your stories I was reading, because I can't wrap my head around this, it's going to be available only on this one certain type of aircraft of Virgin Atlantic's, but it's going to be limited to 6 users at a time.
Wait, what? Why?
Yeah, how is that going to be enforced?
First class.
I've read the story 4 times. I read it while y'all were talking, again. And I can't
so
figure out, what am I missing? There are
like
some rules. You won't be
kindergarten.
able to use it within 250 miles of U.S. airspace. You can't do it during takeoffs and landings. But how are they going to keep you from the 7th person from making the
call? Are going to want to have to harass people about, like,
a sign-up list.
They're going to be walking in the aisle like,
they're going to do it by section.
It'll be Alec Baldwin and 5 other people.
Yeah. Right.
Either way, it's
Words
sad
with
news for me.
friends.
I think that is a nice time period to read and unplug.
Well, you don't have to do. You feel the temptation.
I want
You
somebody
can't
to impose on me.
resist.
Okay, got it. SC, you look very skeptical.
Well, actually, I mean, I get really stressed when I can't access everything on my phone. So actually, that sounds pretty good to me. But I know what you mean. So my story, I came across this today. There's my favorite candle company, because it's a Massachusetts candle company, Yankee Candle Company, of course, has a new line of candles. They're called man candles, which begs the question, why not the portmanteau mandals?
Right.
Duh. But anyway, the scents are really weird, to say the least. I'll give you some of the names. Riding Mower, Mantown. There's also 2x4 and First Down.
2x4 sawdust.
I don't know
So this is to make
what audience this is marketed toward. I don't know too many men
serial killers
that really want a man-scented candle. But I actually have a few suggestions if Yankee Candle Company is looking for any other man-scented candles that I think would ring a bit more true. For example, B.O. Gunpowder, of course, Squatchy. You need a Squatchy candle. Locker Room, Franks and Beans, and lastly, Dutch Oven. I had to go there.
Oh, ew.
That's men.
All right.
That is men, my friend.
All right. I see someone really liked their Brooks movies. All right. That's it for us tonight. We'll see you right back here tomorrow night for more Real News. Good night, everybody.